Welcome to Monk's Temple. Take a long, slow breath. Feel the air moving in, filling your lungs, and then releasing. Let your body settle into whatever surface is holding you right now. There's nowhere you need to go. Nothing you need to accomplish in this moment. This is simply time for you, time to rest, time to listen, time to let the mind soften like butter left out in a warm kitchen. You might be surprised to learn that exhaustion isn't always about how much sleep you got last night. There's a deeper tiredness that many people carry, a weariness that doesn't lift no matter how many hours you spend in bed. This exhaustion lives in the spaces between your thoughts. It's the background hum of effort that follows you from morning until night. It's the subtle tension of trying to be someone, trying to say the right thing, trying to make sure your life looks the way it should. The Buddha noticed this kind of exhaustion over 2,000 years ago. He saw people everywhere who were working themselves to the bone, not in the fields or the markets, but inside their own minds. They were working to maintain an image, to prop up a version of themselves that they believed was real and solid and desperately in need of protection. He called this the construction of self, the ego, the I am, that we spend our entire lives trying to defend. Think about your own day. When you walk into a meeting at work, part of your mind immediately begins performing. You adjust your posture, you choose your words carefully, you monitor how others are responding to you. You're not just participating in the meeting. You're also watching yourself participate, making sure the character you're playing comes across as competent, confident, and in control. This is exhausting work, and it never stops. When you meet friends for dinner, the performance continues. You edit your stories to make yourself look good. You hide the parts of your week that felt messy or uncertain. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny because laughing makes you seem agreeable. You're managing your image constantly, and this management requires energy, lots of it. Even when you're alone, scrolling through your phone, the performance continues. You see what others are posting, and you measure yourself against their carefully curated lives. You think about what you might post, how you might present yourself, what version of you want the world to see. The mind never takes a break from this job. It works in shifts around the clock, 7 days a week, with no vacation and no overtime pay. The Buddha saw that this constant performance is the root of human suffering. It's not that the world is cruel or that life is hard, though sometimes it is. The suffering comes from our endless effort to prop up something that doesn't actually exist as a solid, permanent thing. We're building walls around empty space, defending a fortress that's made of nothing but thoughts and stories. But what if you could stop? What if you could clock out from this job, just for a while, and see what's left when the performance ends? What if the exhaustion you've been carrying isn't a necessary part of life, but a burden you can simply set down? That's what we're going to explore together in the time ahead. We'll look at the different ways we trap ourselves, the different cages we build with our own minds. And we'll discover, step by step, that these cages have always been open. We just never noticed because we were too busy polishing the bars. Before we go further, just check in with your body. Notice your shoulders. Are they up near your ears? Let them drop. Notice your jaw. Is it clenched? Let it soften. Notice your forehead. Is it wrinkled with concentration? Let it smooth out. You don't need to try hard to get these teachings. You don't need to concentrate or remember everything. You just need to be here, comfortable and open, like a field receiving rain. The Buddhist teachings have survived for more than 2 millennia because they address something universal, something that hasn't changed even as the world has transformed around us. People in ancient India felt the same exhaustion you feel. They worried about what others thought of them. They compared themselves to their neighbors. They defended opinions they'd never examined. They clung to a sense of self that caused them endless anxiety. And the Buddha offered them a way out, a path that leads from struggle to peace, from performance to presence, from exhaustion to ease. That same path is available to you right now, tonight, as you rest and listen. You don't need to travel to a monastery or spend years in meditation. You just need to be willing to look honestly at your own mind, to see the patterns that have been running on autopilot, and to discover that you have more choice than you ever realized. So settle in. Get comfortable. Let the outside world fade away. This time is for you. Nothing is required of you except presence. Just be here, breathing, resting, ready to see something new about the mind that has been running your life for so long. Let's begin with a story, a window into this ancient wisdom that shows how relevant it remains today. In a bustling modern city lived a woman named Priya. From the outside, her life looked successful. She had a corner office at a marketing firm, a beautiful apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a calendar filled with social engagements. Her colleagues admired her. Her friends envied her. But inside, Priya was drowning. Every morning, she spent an hour getting ready, not just her body, but her persona. She would stand in front of her closet, anxiety fluttering in her chest, trying to select the outfit that would send the right message. Powerful but not intimidating. Friendly but not desperate. Stylish but not trying too hard. The outfit was just the beginning. Then came the mental preparation for the day ahead. The meetings where she needed to sound brilliant. The emails she needed to craft with just the right tone. The lunch with colleagues where she needed to be charming but not overbearing. By the time she walked into her office, she was already exhausted. And the day had barely begun. Priya was living what the Buddha would call the life of the persona, the mask. And the mask has a terrible secret. It requires constant maintenance. You can't put it on and forget about it. You have to keep checking it, adjusting it, making sure it hasn't slipped. Is this outfit working? Did I say the right thing in that meeting? Does my laugh sound fake? The questions never stop because the mask is fragile. It's not your real face. It's something you constructed, and constructions need constant shoring up. The psychological term for this is impression management. Every social interaction becomes a performance where you're both the actor and the critic, watching yourself from the audience, judging how well you're doing. This splits your mind in two. Part of you is experiencing life, and part of you is constantly evaluating how that experience looks to others. It's like trying to watch a movie while also standing outside the theater, checking to see if anyone notices you're there. This split consciousness is incredibly draining. It's why you can spend an evening with friends and come home feeling wrung out, even though nothing particularly stressful happened. You were working the whole time, managing impressions, monitoring reactions, adjusting your performance. It's a full-time job with no breaks. The Buddha saw this clearly. He taught that this constant self-monitoring is a form of suffering he called dukkha, often translated as unsatisfactoriness or stress. It's the background hum of anxiety that accompanies the sense of having a self that needs to be protected and promoted. As long as you believe you are this fragile persona, this collection of images and stories, you will be exhausted. There's no other way. The work of maintaining a mask never ends. Priya didn't know any of this, at least not consciously. She just knew she was tired all the time. She had tried everything. Better sleep, more exercise, vitamins, meditation apps. Nothing touched the deep weariness she carried. She would lie in bed at night, her body still, but her mind racing through the day's interactions, replaying conversations, worrying about things she'd said, planning what she'd say tomorrow. Her body rested, but her mind never clocked out. One evening, she attended a gathering at a friend's house. The room was filled with the usual crowd, professionals in their 30s and 40s, drinking wine, making small talk, subtly competing with each other through stories of their accomplishments. Priya was deep in her performance, telling a carefully edited version of a work project, when she noticed an older woman sitting quietly in the corner. The woman wasn't doing anything special. She wasn't meditating or chanting or doing yoga poses. She was just sitting, holding a cup of tea, watching the room with a gentle smile. There was something about her presence that drew Priya's attention. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or make anyone like her. She was simply there, completely at ease, like a cat in a patch of sunlight. Priya found herself walking over and sitting down next to the woman. She didn't know what to say. The usual social scripts felt wrong somehow. After a long silence, the woman turned to her and said, "You look very tired." Priya almost laughed. Tired didn't begin to cover it. But something in the woman's eyes made her tell the truth for what felt like the first time in years. "I am tired. I'm always tired. I don't know why. I do everything right. I take care of myself. But I'm exhausted down to my bones." The woman nodded slowly. "You're tired because you're carrying something very heavy." Priya looked down at herself. She wasn't carrying anything. No bags, no packages, no physical weight. "It's not on your shoulders," the woman said gently. "It's in your mind. You're carrying an image of yourself that you're trying to protect. And that image is very heavy." Priya felt something shift in her chest. She didn't understand what the woman meant, not fully, but something in the words resonated. An image of herself. Yes, that was exactly what she spent her days managing. The competent professional. The successful woman. The person who had it all together. That image required constant effort to maintain. And the effort was exhausting. The woman smiled again. "You know, you don't have to carry it. You could just set it down and see what happens." "But then who would I be?" Priya asked, and the question came out more desperate than she intended. "Maybe you'd find out," the woman said. "Maybe you'd discover who you are when you're not trying to be anyone at all." That night, Priya went home and stood in front of her mirror. She looked at the woman looking back at her. The carefully styled hair. The subtle makeup. The expression she'd practiced so many times, confident but warm, successful but approachable. And for the first time, she saw it as a mask. A beautiful, expensive, carefully maintained mask. But a mask nonetheless. What would happen if she took it off? What would be underneath? She didn't know. The question was terrifying and thrilling at the same time. She had spent so long building this persona that she'd forgotten there might be anything else. But the old woman's words kept echoing. You could just set it down and see what happens. This is where real transformation begins. Not with effort and striving, but with a simple recognition. You are carrying something you don't need to carry. You are defending something that doesn't require defense. You are performing a role that was never assigned to you in the first place. And in that recognition, the possibility of putting it down suddenly appears. If this teaching is beginning to resonate with you, if you're starting to sense the weight of your own masks and performances, please take a moment to subscribe to Monk's Temple. This is a simple way to support these teachings and ensure they continue to reach people like you, people who are ready to set down their burdens and discover genuine peace. The path is walked more easily with companions, and subscribing connects you to a community of fellow travelers. Just click the subscribe button now. It's a small act that carries real intention, a way of telling yourself that this journey matters, that your peace matters. Thank you. Now let's go deeper into this question of who we are beneath the masks. The Buddha taught that what we call the self is actually 5 aggregates, 5 bundles of processes constantly arising and passing away. There's the body, always changing, cells dying and being replaced, never the same from moment to moment. There's feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, shifting like weather. There's perception, the labels we put on things, recognizing a tree as a tree, a person as a person. There's mental formations, thoughts, intentions, habits, desires, all flowing like a river. And there's consciousness, the simple awareness that knows all of this. None of these aggregates is a permanent, solid self. They're processes, not things. But we grab onto them and say, this is me, this is mine, this is who I am. We identify with our bodies, our feelings, our thoughts, our opinions, our stories. And then we spend our lives trying to protect and promote these things that are, by their very nature, impermanent and uncontrollable. This is like trying to build a house on a river and then being shocked when it washes away. The river was never meant to hold a house. The mind was never meant to hold a fixed identity. Its flow, constant flow, and peace comes from learning to flow with it, not from trying to freeze it into a permanent shape. The psychological implications of this are profound. Most of your suffering comes from resistance to change. You want things to stay the same, especially the things that support your self-image. You want to stay young because your self-image includes being attractive. You want to stay successful because your self-image includes being accomplished. You want to be liked because your self-image includes being popular. But everything changes. Bodies age. Careers fluctuate. Relationships shift. And each change feels like a threat because it threatens the self you're trying to maintain. But what if the self wasn't a thing to be maintained? What if it was just a process, like breathing, like the weather, like the flow of a river? What if you could stop trying to hold it in place and just let it be what it is, constantly changing, constantly new, constantly alive? This isn't a philosophy of nihilism or self-hatred. It's not saying you don't exist or that your life doesn't matter. It's saying that the way you've been experiencing yourself, as a solid, separate, permanent entity, is a misperception. And this misperception is the source of your exhaustion. You're trying to protect something that was never there to begin with. Think about a wave in the ocean. The wave looks like a distinct thing. You can see it, you can point to it, you can even surf on it. But is the wave really separate from the ocean? Does it have an independent existence? No. It's just a temporary form that the ocean takes, arising due to wind and currents, persisting for a moment, and then dissolving back into the vastness. The wave doesn't need to protect itself. It doesn't worry about whether it's big enough or lasts long enough. It just arises, does its wave thing, and returns to the source. You are like that wave. Your sense of being a separate self is a temporary formation arising from the vast field of awareness. It's not wrong or bad. It's just not as solid and permanent as it seems. And when you see this, really see it, the need to defend and promote this separate self begins to dissolve. You can still function in the world. You can still have preferences and make choices and take action. But you do it from a place of ease rather than desperation. You're surfing the wave instead of trying to freeze it into ice. This understanding doesn't come from believing a concept. It comes from looking directly at your own experience. Right now, can you find a permanent, unchanging self? Look closely. Notice your thoughts. They come and go. Can you find a self that exists separately from these thoughts? Notice your body. It's constantly changing, sending different signals every moment. Can you find a self that's separate from these sensations? Notice your feelings. They shift like clouds. Can you find a self that's untouched by this emotional weather? What you'll find, if you look honestly, is that there's no fixed self to be found. There's just the flow of experience, arising and passing, and the awareness that knows it. And that awareness, that knowing presence, is not a thing you can grab hold of. It's more like space, open, clear, allowing everything to happen without being stained by anything. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed to. Not the freedom of becoming a perfect self, but the freedom of realizing you were never a self to begin with. Not in the way you thought. You were always the ocean pretending to be a wave, and the exhaustion came from trying so hard to be a good wave, a successful wave, a wave that would last forever. When you remember you're the ocean, the wave can just play. It can rise and fall, appear and disappear, without anxiety, without effort, without exhaustion. Let this sink in as you rest here. You don't need to achieve anything. You don't need to become anyone. You just need to notice what's already true. The wave has always been ocean. The self has always been awareness. And awareness doesn't get tired. It doesn't need to defend itself. It doesn't compare itself to other awareness. It just is, open and empty and full of peace. Let me tell you another story, this time about a man named David who discovered something surprising about the thoughts he'd been believing his whole life. David grew up in a family with very strong opinions. Dinner table conversations weren't conversations at all. They were affirmations. Everyone agreed with everyone else. By the time David was 12, he knew exactly what to believe about politics, money, relationships, and success. He knew because he'd been told, over and over, by people he loved and trusted. As he grew older, David noticed something strange. When he encountered people with different beliefs, he would feel a flash of anger. Not reasoned disagreement, but visceral, bodily anger. His chest would tighten. His jaw would clench. Words would rise in his throat, sharp and defensive. He wasn't just disagreeing. He felt personally attacked. He didn't understand this reaction. He considered himself open-minded. But his body told a different story. His body responded to opposing views like a soldier responding to enemy fire. What David didn't realize was that his beliefs had become his identity. He wasn't just someone who held certain views. He was those views. The belief and the self had merged. So when someone challenged the belief, they weren't offering a different perspective. They were attacking his very existence. No wonder his body reacted with such force. The Buddha encountered this constantly. He would meet people who spent their lives building elaborate belief systems, defending them fiercely. And he would ask them a simple question: have you actually examined this belief yourself, or did you just inherit it? Most people couldn't answer. They had never even considered the question. Their beliefs were like furniture in a room they'd lived in since childhood. They'd stopped noticing it long ago. The Buddha's teaching on this was radical. He told people not to believe anything just because it's tradition, scripture, logical, or what their teacher says. Instead, test it in your own experience. If a belief leads to greed, hatred, and delusion, it's unwholesome. If it leads to generosity, compassion, and clarity, it's wholesome. The truth of a belief is revealed by its fruits, not by its source. This is a completely different way of relating to beliefs. It's about treating beliefs as tools rather than possessions. A carpenter doesn't defend his hammer when someone suggests a screwdriver might work better. He just picks up the screwdriver. The hammer isn't his identity. It's a tool. But for most people, beliefs have become identity. Letting go of a belief feels like losing a part of yourself. So you hold on, even when the belief causes suffering, even when it no longer makes sense in your actual life. David eventually had an experience that cracked this open. At a party, someone contradicted one of his core beliefs. The familiar rage rose in his chest. But before he could speak, the person said, "I used to believe exactly what you believe. I was raised with it. But then I met people who lived different lives, and I started seeing things differently." David stopped. The words hit him unexpectedly. This person wasn't attacking him. This person was once him. They had walked the same path, believed the same things, and then something shifted. Not because they were wrong or brainwashed, but because their life experience taught them something new. For the first time, David didn't hear a challenge. He heard a story. He got curious. He asked questions instead of making arguments. He listened instead of planning his rebuttal. In that conversation, something shifted. He saw that his belief wasn't actually his. It was his father's, his uncle's, his community's. He had never really examined it. He had just absorbed it and then spent years defending it. The relief that followed was unexpected. He didn't immediately change his views. That wasn't the point. The point was they stopped being a fortress he had to defend. They became ideas he could hold lightly, examine honestly, and modify if experience suggested. The anger in his body when encountering opposing views began to soften. He could disagree without feeling annihilated. He could listen without feeling threatened. This is the freedom of examining your beliefs. It's not about having no opinions. It's about holding opinions as tools rather than treasures. A treasure must be guarded at all costs. A tool can be set down when it's not useful. Right now, notice if there are beliefs you're holding as treasures. Notice what happens in your body when you imagine someone challenging them. That tension, that defensiveness, is a signal. It's telling you that you've merged with the belief. You've forgotten it's just a tool. What would it feel like to set it down, just for a moment? Not to abandon it, just to hold it lightly, to look at it from a little distance, to ask honestly, does this belief actually lead to less suffering in my life? Have I tested this myself, or am I just repeating what I was told? You might find this questioning doesn't destroy you. It liberates you. The fortress you've been defending was never under attack. The walls were just thoughts, and thoughts can be seen through. Now let's look at another pillar of exhaustion, one that might be running in the background of your mind right now, even as you listen. It's the habit of comparison. Think about how many times today you've measured yourself against someone else. Maybe you saw vacation photos and felt your own life was less exciting. Maybe a colleague received praise and you calculated whether you've received enough praise lately. Maybe you scrolled through social media and unconsciously ranked yourself against everyone who appeared. This happens automatically, constantly, and it's exhausting. The comparison mind is never satisfied. When you compare to someone with less, you might feel temporary relief, but it's soon replaced by guilt. When you compare to someone with more, you feel inadequate. There's no winning. The goalposts keep moving. There's always someone richer, smarter, more attractive, more successful. The Buddha understood this perfectly. He taught that comparison is suffering based on a delusion. The delusion is that there's a fixed scale of worth and your position on it determines your value. But worth isn't like height or weight. It's not measurable. It's not a quantity. It's a quality of being that is inherent and unique to each person. Think about flowers. Is a rose better than a daisy? Is an orchid superior to a sunflower? The question doesn't make sense. Each flower has its own beauty, its own purpose. They're not in competition. They're just different expressions of the same life force. Human beings are the same. We're not meant to be ranked. But the mind has been trained from an early age to compare. In school, you were graded and ranked. In sports, scores were kept. At work, performance reviews tell you where you stand. Society constantly reinforces that life is a competition. It's no wonder the comparison habit runs so deep. The problem is this habit creates endless suffering. When you compare and find yourself lacking, you feel shame. When you compare and find yourself ahead, you feel a temporary high built on others being below you. What happens when they catch up? The high disappears and you're back to striving. There's a story about two farmers, Elena and Marco. They both grew tomatoes on neighboring farms. Elena was consumed by comparison. Every morning, she looked at Marco's fields and measured her tomatoes against his. If his were redder, she felt despair. If hers were larger, she felt a brief thrill. But the thrill never lasted because soon she'd notice something else to compare. Maybe his plants were taller. Maybe his irrigation was better. There was always something. Elena's mood depended entirely on how her tomatoes measured up. She couldn't enjoy her own harvest because she was too busy checking his. She couldn't take pleasure in a good season because she was terrified his might be better. Marco rarely looked at Elena's fields. He was too busy with his own. He noticed when his tomatoes needed water. He watched the sun move across his plants. He felt the soil and knew when it was ready for planting. He loved his work not because he was winning, but because he was engaged in the simple act of growing. One year, a blight swept through. Both farms were affected. Elena was devastated, not just by the damage, but because Marco's crops were damaged too, which meant she couldn't even have the consolation of doing better than him. Her entire framework for feeling okay collapsed. Marco was sad about his tomatoes. He had put love into them. But he wasn't devastated. His sense of self wasn't tied to being better than Elena. It was tied to the simple act of farming, to the relationship with the land. When the blight passed, he cleared the damaged plants and prepared for the next season. Elena, still stuck in comparison, couldn't move forward. She was too busy calculating whose losses were worse. This story illustrates the trap. When your worth is tied to how you measure up, you're at the mercy of circumstances you can't control. Someone will always be ahead. Crops will always fail sometimes. Each disruption feels like a threat to your existence. The alternative isn't to stop caring. It's to shift from comparison to engagement. Instead of asking, how do I measure up, ask, what's here right now? Instead of checking an imaginary leaderboard, check in with your actual experience. What are you feeling? What are you learning? What are you creating? The answers are real. The leaderboard exists only in your mind. The Buddha taught a practice called mudita, sympathetic joy, as an antidote to comparison. Mudita is the capacity to feel happy for someone else's success without envy. It sounds impossible until you understand that joy isn't a limited resource. When someone else succeeds, the light in the world increases. That light illuminates everyone. There's no need to dim another's candle to make your own shine brighter. When you genuinely rejoice in another's happiness, your own happiness increases. This isn't about forcing feelings. It's about seeing the truth that we're not separate competitors in a zero-sum game. We're interconnected. Your neighbor's joy adds to the total joy in the world. Your colleague's success creates possibilities that can benefit everyone. When you see this, the need to compare dissolves. Right now, bring to mind someone who has something you want. Success, happiness, a quality you admire. Notice the feeling in your body. Is there tightness? That's the comparison habit. Now, just for a moment, try something different. Imagine their success doesn't take anything from you. Imagine their happiness adds to the total happiness available. Wish them well, genuinely, without agenda. This is the beginning of mudita, and it's also the beginning of freedom from the exhausting game of comparison. Let's explore another way we exhaust ourselves, the constant effort to control how others see us. This is closely related to the masks we talked about earlier, but it deserves its own attention because it's so pervasive and so draining. Think about how much of your mental energy goes into managing your reputation. You worry about what your boss thinks of your work. You wonder if your friends really like you or just tolerate you. You craft your online presence carefully, selecting which photos to post, which opinions to share, which parts of your life to highlight and which to hide. This isn't just occasional concern. It's a constant background hum, a low-grade anxiety about being seen in the right way. The Buddha would say this is a form of clinging, specifically clinging to the opinion of others. And like all forms of clinging, it creates suffering because it's based on something you can't control. You can influence what people think of you, but you can never control it completely. People will always interpret your actions through their own filters, their own biases, their own moods. You could be the kindest person in the world, and someone will still find a reason to criticize you. You could achieve great things, and someone will still diminish your accomplishments. Yet despite knowing this intellectually, you continue to pour energy into reputation management. Why? Because the need for approval runs deep. Evolutionarily, being accepted by the tribe meant survival. Rejection could mean death. Your nervous system hasn't caught up with modern reality. It still treats social disapproval as a life-or-death threat. So when someone criticizes you, your body reacts as if you're being physically attacked. When someone might be judging you negatively, your mind spins with anxiety as if you're in genuine danger. This is exhausting. It's like living in a state of constant alert, always scanning for signs of disapproval, always adjusting your behavior to avoid rejection. The energy this consumes is enormous, and it's energy that could be used for living, for creating, for loving, for simply being present. Let me tell you about a woman named Sophia who discovered this firsthand. Sophia was a high school teacher, and she was beloved by her students. She was creative, passionate, and genuinely cared about the young people in her classroom. But she was also exhausted. Every evening, she would come home and collapse. Weekends were barely enough to recover before the next week began. Sophia assumed this was just the nature of teaching. It's a demanding job, after all. But one summer, she had a conversation that changed her perspective. She was talking with a retired teacher named Grace, who had taught for 40 years and still had energy to volunteer, travel, and spend time with her grandchildren. Sophia asked her secret. Grace smiled and said, "I stopped caring what anyone thought of me. Not in an arrogant way. I just realized I couldn't control it, and trying was making me sick." She explained that early in her career, she had been consumed by reputation management. She worried about what her principal thought, what other teachers thought, what parents thought. She lay awake at night replaying conversations, wondering if she'd said the wrong thing. She taught her classes with one eye on the students and one eye on an imaginary audience judging her performance. Then one day, a student thanked her for a lesson and said something that stuck. "You're the only teacher who seems like you're actually here with us." Grace realized that when she was focused on managing impressions, she wasn't fully present. The students could tell. And the irony was that her effort to be seen as a good teacher was actually making her a worse teacher. She was so busy performing that she wasn't actually teaching. So she started experimenting. She would walk into her classroom and, instead of thinking about how she appeared, she would just focus on the material, on the students, on the moment itself. She stopped monitoring herself. She stopped worrying about what others thought. She just taught. The results surprised her. Her teaching improved. Her relationships with students deepened. And most importantly, her exhaustion lifted. She still worked hard, but she wasn't working two jobs anymore, the job of teaching and the job of managing her reputation. She had quit the second job, and the relief was enormous. Sophia realized she was doing the same thing. She was working two jobs. She was teaching her students and simultaneously performing teacher for an invisible audience. No wonder she was exhausted. She started practicing what Grace described. When she walked into her classroom, she would take a breath and remind herself that her only job was to be present with these young people. The performance could stop. The reputation could take care of itself. It wasn't easy at first. The habit of self-monitoring was deeply ingrained. But gradually, she noticed shifts. She stopped replaying conversations at night. She stopped worrying about whether a particular lesson made her look good or bad. She just taught. And like Grace, she found that her teaching improved, her connections deepened, and her energy returned. This is available to you too, in whatever context you find yourself. At work, you can take a breath and remind yourself that your only job is to do the work, not to manage how you appear while doing it. With friends, you can listen and respond without monitoring whether you're being liked. Online, you can share what genuinely matters to you without calculating how it will be received. The opinions of others are not yours to control. They never were. You've been carrying a burden that was never yours to carry. The relief of setting it down is available right now, in this moment, simply by noticing that you're performing and choosing, just for a breath, to stop. Now we come to something that might surprise you. All of this letting go, this releasing of masks and comparisons and borrowed beliefs, it's not something you can force. In fact, trying to force it is just another form of the same problem. Think about it. You've spent your whole life trying to become someone. The good student, the successful professional, the likable friend, the worthy person. Now you're trying to become someone who doesn't need to become anyone. You're trying to achieve non-achievement. You're striving to stop striving. Can you see the contradiction? This is a trap that many spiritual seekers fall into. They take up meditation or yoga or study with a teacher, and they approach it the same way they've approached everything else in life, as a project to be completed, a goal to be achieved, a self-improvement plan to be executed. They want to be enlightened, and they want to be enlightened now. So they try harder. They meditate longer. They force themselves to be present. And they end up more exhausted than when they started, because now they're not only maintaining their old masks, they're also trying to maintain the mask of a good spiritual practitioner. The Buddha saw this clearly. He taught that the path is not about forcing anything. It's about seeing clearly. When you see clearly, letting go happens naturally, the way your hand opens when you realize you're holding a hot coal. You don't have to force your fingers to open. The opening happens automatically when you see the truth of the situation. This is why the Buddha's teachings are often described as a path of investigation, not a path of willpower. You're not supposed to muscle your way to freedom. You're supposed to look closely at your experience and see what's actually true. When you see that the mask is just a mask, it falls away on its own. When you see that comparison is suffering, you naturally stop comparing. When you see that a belief was borrowed, you naturally hold it more lightly. Let me tell you a story about a man named James who learned this lesson the hard way. James was a successful lawyer who had everything he thought he wanted. But he was deeply unhappy. So he did what many people do. He went looking for answers. He read spiritual books, attended retreats, tried different meditation techniques. He approached all of this with the same determination he brought to his law practice. He was going to find peace if it killed him. And it almost did. James would sit for hours in meditation, forcing his mind to be quiet. When thoughts arose, he would battle them, trying to push them away. When he felt restless or bored, he would grit his teeth and sit longer. He was at war with his own mind, and like all wars, it was creating suffering on both sides. After months of this, James was more miserable than when he started. He had added a new layer of failure to his self-concept. Not only was he unhappy in his regular life, now he was also bad at meditation. He couldn't even find peace correctly. In desperation, he went to speak with a teacher at a local meditation center. He poured out his story, all his efforts, all his struggles, all his failures. The teacher listened patiently, then asked a simple question. When you're sitting in meditation and a thought arises, what do you do? I push it away, James said. I try to get rid of it so I can be peaceful. And how's that working? The teacher asked with a gentle smile. James had to laugh. Terribly. The thoughts just fight back. The teacher nodded. Of course they do. If someone came to your door and tried to push you out of your own house, what would you do? I'd push back, James said. Exactly. Your thoughts are arising in their own home, the mind. When you try to push them out, they resist. They get stronger. The struggle itself is what's exhausting you. James felt something shift. So what should I do? Just let them win. Let them be, the teacher said. They're not enemies. They're just thoughts. They arise, they stay for a while, they pass away. Your job isn't to fight them. Your job is to stop adding to them. When a thought arises, just notice it. Don't push it away. Don't chase after it. Let it be there, and let it go on its own. Like watching clouds pass across the sky. James tried this in his next meditation. When thoughts arose, he didn't fight. He just noticed them, the way you might notice a car passing by your window. Some thoughts were interesting. Some were boring. Some were pleasant. Some were unpleasant. But none of them required a response. He just watched them come and go. The relief was immediate. The struggle that had been consuming so much energy simply stopped. He wasn't peaceful in the sense of having no thoughts. He was peaceful because he'd stopped fighting the thoughts he had. The war was over, and he had won by laying down his weapons. This is the paradox at the heart of spiritual practice. You can't force your way to freedom because forcing is part of what you're trying to be free from. The ego trying to kill the ego is like a dog chasing its own tail. It can run forever and never catch what it's after. The only way out is to see through the whole project, to recognize that you don't need to become anything because you already are what you're seeking. Right now, notice if you're trying to get something from these teachings. Maybe you're trying to become more peaceful. Maybe you're trying to understand perfectly. Maybe you're trying to be a good listener, to get this right. That's the old pattern running even here. Can you let it go, just for this moment? Can you stop trying to achieve anything and just receive? The peace you're looking for isn't at the end of effort. It's at the beginning of allowing. Let's look now at the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Every person carries an internal narrative, a running commentary that explains their life, justifies their actions, and predicts their future. You have a story about your childhood, about why you are the way you are, about what you're good at and what you struggle with. This story feels like the truth of who you are. But is it? The Buddha would say this story is just another construction, another collection of thoughts that you've mistaken for reality. The events of your life happened, certainly. But the meaning you've attached to them, the identity you've built from them, that's something you created. And like all creations, it can be seen through. Think about a painful event from your past. Maybe a failure, a rejection, a loss. That event happened. But the story you tell about it, this proves I'm not good enough, or this is why I can't trust people, that's not the event itself. That's interpretation. And interpretations can change. The same event could be interpreted differently. This taught me resilience, or this showed me who my real friends are. The event is fixed. The meaning is not. Yet you treat your story as if it were solid fact. You defend it. When someone suggests you might be capable of something your story says you're not, you feel a flash of resistance. Your story is being challenged, and your story feels like you. So you hold on to it, even when it causes suffering. Even when it limits you. Even when it keeps you stuck in patterns you say you want to change. There's a woman named Carmen who discovered this about her own story. Carmen had been told her whole life that she was shy. Her parents described her that way. Teachers wrote it on report cards. Friends accepted it as just part of who she was. And Carmen believed it. She built an identity around being shy. It explained why she was quiet in groups, why she avoided attention, why she felt anxious in social situations. The story gave her a way to understand herself. But the story also became a cage. Whenever she thought about speaking up in a meeting or introducing herself to someone new, the story would whisper, "You can't. You're shy." And she would believe it. She would stay quiet, stay small, stay safe inside the boundaries her story had created. One day, a colleague asked Carmen to present at a conference. Carmen's immediate reaction was terror. Her story screamed, "Shy people don't give presentations." She started to refuse, but something stopped her. The colleague was looking at her with such confidence, such certainty that Carmen could do it. For a moment, Carmen saw herself through her colleague's eyes, not as a shy person, but as a capable professional with valuable things to say. In that moment, the story wobbled. What if shy wasn't a permanent fact about her? What if it was just a habit, a pattern she'd learned and repeated so often it felt like truth? What if she could try something different, just this once, and see what happened? Carmen said yes to the presentation. She was terrified the whole time she prepared. Her story fought back hard. But she kept noticing the wobble, the possibility that she might be more than the story said. When the day came, she was nervous, but she did it. She stood in front of people and spoke. Nothing terrible happened. No one laughed. No one could tell she was shaking inside. Afterward, people thanked her. They said she was informative, engaging, clear. The story didn't disappear overnight. But a crack had formed. Carmen started experimenting more. She spoke up in meetings sometimes. She introduced herself to strangers at parties. Each time, her story would protest, but she would notice the protest as just thoughts, not facts. And slowly, the identity of shy person began to loosen. It didn't define her anymore. It was just a label that sometimes fit and sometimes didn't, depending on the situation, depending on her mood, depending on 1,000 factors. This is the freedom of seeing through your stories. Not that you become someone else, but that you stop being imprisoned by who you thought you were. The past doesn't have to dictate the future. The labels you've collected don't have to be your identity. You are not your story. You are the one telling the story, and you can tell a different one. Or you can stop telling stories altogether and just live, directly, without the constant commentary. Right now, notice the stories you tell about yourself. I'm not good at math. I'm not a morning person. I'm always anxious in relationships. I'm not creative. Where did these stories come from? Who told you they were true? Have you ever tested them, or have you just believed them because you've repeated them so often? What would happen if you held them lightly, as hypotheses rather than facts? What new possibilities might open up? As we come to the end of this journey together, let's gather what we've explored. You've seen how the masks you wear create exhaustion that sleep cannot cure. You've recognized the game of comparison and how it keeps you trapped in endless measuring. You felt the weight of borrowed beliefs you defend without knowing why. You've touched the illusion of a permanent self that seems so real but is just changing processes. And you've learned that letting go cannot be forced, only allowed through patient cultivation. None of this is about becoming a better person. It's about seeing through the illusion that you needed to become anything at all. The peace you seek is not ahead of you after enough effort. It's here, now, beneath the constant activity of trying to be someone. Think of your mind as vast sky. Thoughts, feelings, sensations are just weather passing through. Storms arise and pass. Clouds come and go. But the sky is never harmed. It never defends itself. It never compares one cloud to another. It just holds everything, equally, peacefully. You are that sky. You've just forgotten, distracted by the weather. When you remember you're the sky, the clouds can do what they do without threatening your peace. In these final moments, feel what it's like to simply be. Not to be a good meditator. Not to be someone who understands these teachings. Just to be. Breathing. Resting. Aware. When you return to daily life, you'll be tempted to pick up the masks again. The world will encourage you to perform, to compare, to defend. But now you know the exhaustion of that path. And you know there's another way. In each moment, you have a choice. You can jump back into the story, or you can rest as the sky. You can defend the fortress, or you can see it was never under attack. The teachings are now yours to explore. Not to believe, but to test. The path doesn't end here. It begins here, in the simple recognition that you've been carrying a weight you can set down. So set it down now. Soften your shoulders. Let your breath be natural. Rest in the awareness that has been here all along, watching everything, touched by nothing. This is your home. This is your peace. This is what remains when the performance finally stops. Thank you for being here, for listening, for showing up for yourself. May you walk the path of awakening with ease. May you find the freedom that was never lost. May you rest as the sky, always.